I was 16 when I was kicked out of my own home. But this wasn't some I don't get along with my parents drama. No, this was a flat-out decision that left me feeling like an invisible, unwanted ghost. It all started with the fact that my twin sister Sarah, who was always the golden child in our family, had gotten pregnant. My parents, instead of reacting with concern or even disappointment, were thrilled. As if she had won an award for the most impressive achievement at 16, they celebrated like it was the best thing that had ever happened to our family. Meanwhile, I, the one who had always tried to make myself seen, the one who worked hard to be noticed, was completely overlooked. I always knew I wasn't the priority in their lives, but the moment my sister's pregnancy was announced, I realized just how expendable I was in their eyes. I had already been the afterthought, but now I was disposable. Sarah got the room, I got the boot. Your sister needs the room for the baby, my mom said one night, matter-of-factly, as if she were asking me to give up a piece of gum. Not my personal space, the one place I had where I could pretend things were normal. You'll figure it out. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her that I had been figuring things out for years. I wanted to remind her that I was just 16, and figuring it out meant finding a way to survive. To breathe. When your parents didn't even notice you, but I didn't. I couldn't because I knew what would happen if I spoke up. I would be told, once again, that I was the one causing problems. I would be told, once again, that it wasn't about me, but about Sarah. I was always told I wasn't the priority, and now, more than ever. I realized it was true. I had been trying to be good enough for them for so long, but nothing ever worked. So I did what I had to do, pack up my things. It didn't matter that I had nowhere to go. They didn't care that I was just a kid, thrown out on my own with barely anything but the clothes on my back and a few items I could stuff into a backpack. No one offered to help, not even with the most basic of things like, where the hell was I supposed to go? I was 16, I didn't have a job, I didn't have savings, and I didn't have friends I could lean on. I was alone. My dad stood there, arms crossed, looking at me like I was a problem he was ready to be rid of. You're a young man now. You need to figure it out, he said, the coldness in his voice cutting through me. That night, I packed my things. It wasn't much, a few clothes, some books, and some small trinkets my grandfather had given me before he passed away. I stood in my room for a moment longer than I probably should have, staring at the walls. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And now it was going to be turned into a nursery for Sarah's kid, while I was cast out like a burden. It felt like my last shred of dignity was being taken from me. I asked them where I was supposed to go, and they just shrugged it off. Figure it out. My mom said, we're doing this for Sarah. She needs us right now. I wanted to scream. What about me? When have you ever needed me? But I didn't. It wouldn't have mattered. They already made their decision, and I was no longer part of their perfect family picture. I was just in the way. I had no choice but to make do. I grabbed a tent from the garage, pitched it in the backyard, and called it my home. The cold winter nights were brutal. I could hear them inside, laughing, eating together, planning for the new baby. Meanwhile, I huddled in that tent, just a few feet away, wondering how it had come to this. I couldn't even escape into my studies anymore. It was hard to focus on anything when your mind is consumed by the fear of whether or not you'd make it through the night. I made the best of it, though. I worked odd jobs to scrape together enough money to survive. Mowing lawns, shoveling snow, anything. But it wasn't enough. There were days when I went hungry, nights when I could hear my stomach growling, but I didn't have anything to eat. My family didn't notice. They didn't care. They were too busy redecorating my room to make it perfect for Sarah's new family. I was just an afterthought in their perfect little world. I even tried sneaking into the house sometimes, just to get some warmth. But the second I was seen, I was quickly escorted back to the tent like I was some stray dog. But what really hit me was the cold. The physical cold wasn't as bad as the emotional cold. I couldn't shake the feeling that if I had been someone else, someone they wanted, this would never have happened. I had been nothing but an inconvenience to them for so long, and now I was out on my own, struggling to survive. Winter came, and with it, the isolation. The nights in that tent were long and lonely, but they gave me time to think, time to plan. And I knew that this wouldn't be my life forever. I didn't know how I was going to change it, but I knew that I wasn't going to stay stuck in that backyard forever. I had to figure out a way out. I was done being their second choice, their forgotten child. I was done being treated like I didn't matter. I spent those nights in the cold, shivering, trying to keep up with my schoolwork by flashlight, determined not to let them take everything from me. Despite the obstacles, I held on to the one thing I had left: my determination. I couldn't let them break me. I couldn't let them win. And then, one day, while I was walking through the neighborhood, I passed a bakery. The smell of fresh bread wafted through the air, and I couldn't resist stopping. I didn't know it then, but that bakery would change everything. This is where things began to turn around. Little did I know that the universe had a strange way of putting the right people in my life when I needed them the most. But the journey wasn't going to be easy. And my revenge, it wouldn't come in the way you might expect. But it was coming. And it would be worth every bit of the pain and struggle I'd endured. The bakery was my turning point. I didn't know it yet, but it was about to change the course of my life. Frank, the old man who owned the bakery, was as tough as nails, but there was something in the way he looked at me that told me he saw something more than just a homeless kid looking for a handout. The smell of fresh bread, warm from the oven, felt like a brief escape from the cold reality of my situation. I had no real plan when I walked into that bakery, except to beg for some scraps or maybe see if they needed someone to help. I had tried other places, but no one seemed to want me. Most people either ignored me or saw me as a nuisance. But Frankie saw me. "You looking for work, kid?" he asked, his voice rough but not unkind. I hesitated, but desperation made me nod. "Yeah, anything you need help with," I mumbled, not caring what it was. At that point, I would have done anything to stop feeling like a ghost in my own life. Frank grunted, looked me up and down, and then motioned for me to follow him. "You can start by sweeping the floors and helping out in the back. It's not glamorous, but it's a start." That first day was a blur. I swept, I mopped, I cleaned the counters, but what kept me going was the fact that for the first time in what felt like forever, I had a purpose. It was a small, unimportant job to most people, but to me, it was everything. The heat from the bakery's ovens was like a hug for my cold, aching bones. And when Frank handed me my first paycheck, a crumpled pile of cash, the most money I had ever held in my life, I felt a spark of hope. I kept working at the bakery every day after school. I saved every penny I earned, living as cheaply as possible. I couldn't afford much, but the one thing I did buy was a cheap mattress. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I moved into a tiny, musty room above the bakery. Frank let me stay there for free, telling me to keep my head down and work hard. It wasn't perfect, but it was warm, and it was a roof over my head. The first few months were grueling. I woke up at 4 a.m., before the sun, to start my shift. Frank worked me hard, but he was fair. Every day I learned something new: how to knead dough, how to shape it, how to make the perfect loaf of bread. There were no easy days, but with every hour that passed, I felt like I was building something for myself. I had purpose. I had control over my life again. Frank and I didn't talk much about my situation, but every now and then, I'd catch him looking at me like he knew more than I let on. He would ask me about my day, my plans, what I wanted to do with my life. It felt strange at first, but I appreciated the fact that he cared enough to ask. It was the first time someone had shown any interest in me outside of being a charity case. One day, after a particularly grueling shift, Frank sat me down. "You're doing good work, kid," he said, handing me another envelope. "Here's your paycheck. I also wanted to let you know that the room upstairs is yours to keep. No charge, as long as you keep working here." I couldn't believe it. He was giving me a chance more than anyone had ever given me before. He was offering me stability, a roof over my head, and an opportunity to keep moving forward. I looked at him, my throat tight. "Thanks, Frank. You don't know what this means." He gave me a small grunt, a half smile. "Yeah, I do. Just don't screw it up." Weeks passed, and I continued to work at the bakery, saving every penny. I started to think that maybe, just maybe, things were starting to turn around, but there were moments when it all hit me. The overwhelming sense of loss that I couldn't escape. I would walk around the bakery and watch families come in, parents with their kids laughing and picking out pastries, and I'd feel that familiar stab of loneliness. It was like being surrounded by everything. I never had a normal family, a place to belong. But I wasn't going to let that stop me. I was building something new for myself, something that didn't involve my toxic family. I wasn't going to let my past dictate my future. Frank had given me a chance to start over, and I was going to make the most of it. The bakery became my anchor. It kept me grounded and reminded me every day that if I worked hard enough, I could carve out a life for myself no matter how small it seemed. Frank never asked about my family, but I knew he was aware of what had happened. He had been through his own struggles, and I think that's why he trusted me. One night, after closing, Frank handed me a set of keys. "In case you ever need to lock up," he said nonchalantly, but I could see the glint of trust in his eyes. It meant more to me than he would ever know. It wasn't just a set of keys, it was a sign that he believed in me. But the world didn't stop being cold just because I found warmth in a bakery. Every now and then, the darkness of my past would creep back in, reminding me of the family that abandoned me. I couldn't help but wonder, why wasn't I good enough for them? Why did they throw me out? But I didn't dwell on it for too long. I was moving forward, and I wasn't going to look back. Then one day, the thing that I feared most happened. I found out that my parents had somehow managed to get involved in my inheritance from my grandfather, the only person in my life who ever treated me with love. When my grandfather died, he left me a sizable inheritance, something that should have been mine once I turned 18. Yes, I turned 18. But somehow, my parents had gotten their hands on it. They had used that money for their own debts, paying off their house and funding Sarah's wedding, and they never said a word about it. The betrayal stung. The pain was like a knife twisting in my gut. All those years of being treated like I didn't matter, and now this. They had used me, taken what was mine, and spent it like it was theirs to control. I felt a wave of anger rush through me, hot and sharp. It was time for them to pay. I wasn't just going to sit back and let them continue to use me for their own gain. No, this time I was taking control, and I had something they didn't expect. I had the truth on my side. They had stolen from me, and I was going to make them pay for it. I didn't waste any time. I took everything I had, every document, every piece of evidence, and I went to a lawyer. I wasn't just fighting for the inheritance, I was fighting for everything they had taken from me: my childhood, my sense of self-worth, my dignity, and I was ready to take them down. I was done being the quiet, invisible kid they thought they could walk all over. I wasn't sure what was coming next, but I knew one thing for sure: it was going to be a battle they didn't see coming. And this time, I wasn't going to lose. The weeks leading up to the legal battle felt like the calm before a storm. I was ready, but I wasn't naive. I knew this wasn't going to be easy. My parents had always been manipulative, and now that they had control of my inheritance, I knew they would fight tooth and nail to keep it. They had already shown me time and time again that they had no shame in taking what wasn't theirs. But this time, I wasn't going to back down. I spent hours gathering evidence, documents, emails, anything that could prove my case. I wasn't just fighting for money, I was fighting for my right to exist as someone who mattered. The past 5 years of my life had been nothing but a series of humiliations. And now I was finally going to expose their lies and greed. It wasn't going to be just about winning the case, it was about showing them that I was worth something. That I wasn't the disposable child they had always made me feel like. The day I met with my lawyer, Karen, was the first moment I felt like I had real control over my life. She was no nonsense, sharp, and made it clear from the start that we were going to fight with everything we had. They may think they can win by playing dirty, but we have the truth on our side, she said. We'll make sure they pay for what they did. Hearing those words gave me a sense of strength I hadn't felt in years. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving, I was fighting back. It wasn't just about money, it was about proving I deserved more than the scraps they had given me. It was about standing up for myself and not letting them destroy everything I had worked so hard to build. The legal process was grueling. There were days when I doubted myself, when the weight of everything started to feel too much to bear. My parents pulled every trick in the book. They tried to make me out to be the ungrateful son, the one who had always been a burden. They even went so far as to try to paint me as someone who had manipulated them into using my inheritance. They had their own lawyer, and he was good, slick, convincing, and determined to twist every piece of evidence in their favor. But Karen was better. Every time my parents tried to throw out a lie, Karen had a counterpoint, a piece of evidence that disproved it. With each passing day, I began to feel like this might actually work. but there were moments, long, dark moments, when I wondered if I was just setting myself up for more heartbreak. It was the emotional toll of it all that made the fight so draining. I wasn't just up against a legal system, I was up against a lifetime of hurt. Every time my parents sat in that courtroom, acting like the victims, I wanted to scream. They didn't see me as a person, just as a tool to get what they wanted. And here they were, once again trying to take everything I had earned. I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep fighting, but I did. One of the hardest parts of the entire process was the emotional manipulation. Every time my parents contacted me, I was flooded with guilt. They tried to reach out, calling and texting, telling me they wanted to make amends. They tried to guilt-trip me into thinking that I was being cruel by not letting them back into my life. My mom, in particular, played the "I'm your mother" card every chance she got. She'd say things like, "You should be helping your family, not making things worse. And family is supposed to stick together." The hypocrisy was suffocating. I couldn't even begin to describe how much that hurt, how much it broke me to hear them try to manipulate me like that. But I knew what was at stake. I wasn't just fighting for the house, I was fighting for my freedom, my dignity. And so I stayed strong. Each time I got a message, I reminded myself of the months I had spent sleeping in that damn tent, shivering in the cold, while they redecorated my old room and fawned over Sarah's baby. I reminded myself of the years I spent invisible, the years I spent feeling worthless. They didn't deserve my sympathy. They didn't deserve a single ounce of my guilt. They had to face the consequences of their actions. The moment I walked into the courtroom for the final hearing, I felt a surge of emotion. I was terrified, my hands were shaking as I clutched the files in my hand, but I also felt something else: pride. I had come this far, and I wasn't about to let them take everything from me again. The courtroom was tense, quiet. As the judge called for the proceedings to begin, my parents were already there, sitting across from me, looking uncomfortable but trying to maintain their composure. Their lawyer was sitting beside them, whispering to them and offering advice, but I could see it in their eyes. They didn't expect this fight. They didn't think I had the guts to stand up for myself, and I was ready to make them regret that. Karen stood up first. She was calm, confident, and sharp. Her voice filled the courtroom as she outlined our case. Piece by piece, we have clear evidence that the plaintiff's family misused his inheritance. She began, pulling out document after document, showing the judge how my parents had spent my money on things that had nothing to do with me. Things like Sarah's wedding and even their own debts. I could see my parents squirming in their seats, their expressions growing more tense with each passing moment. I felt a strange sense of satisfaction wash over me. For the first time, I wasn't the one being pushed around. I wasn't the one who had to take the back seat. The power was in my hands now, and I wasn't going to let it slip away. Finally, it was my turn to speak. My voice was steady, but I could feel the weight of the words as I spoke. For years, I was treated like I didn't matter. I said, my eyes fixed on my parents, who were now avoiding my gaze. You made me feel like I was invisible, like I was the problem. But you never once considered how it affected me. You never once cared about the pain I was going through. And now, you think you can take everything from me? You don't deserve anything from me. I could see their faces redden, could feel the tension in the air as I spoke the truth, but I wasn't done yet. You took my money, my inheritance, and used it for your own purposes while I was left struggling. You didn't just steal my money, you stole my childhood, my dignity, and my right to be seen as equal. And now I'm taking it all back. Everything you took from me, I'm getting it back. The judge listened intently, and when it was time to announce the verdict, the room fell silent. My heart raced, and the tension was unbearable. I had fought so hard to get here. But now came the moment of truth. When the judge spoke, it felt like a weight was lifted off my shoulders. The court rules in favor of the plaintiff. The defendant must pay back the amount of the inheritance, plus damages for emotional distress. My parents were stunned, their faces pale as they heard the ruling. I couldn't help but feel a rush of satisfaction, mixed with something deeper: freedom. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't the kid who had been discarded. I had stood up for myself, and I had won. Leaving the courthouse was a surreal moment. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing: I wasn't going to be their punching bag anymore. They couldn't hurt me. Not anymore. As I walked out, I felt lighter, freer, and ready to take on whatever came next. The long road ahead didn't seem as daunting now. I was done being their victim. Now, I was in control of my life. The months after the legal battle felt like a whirlwind. The judge's ruling was a huge victory for me, but the aftermath was anything but peaceful. My parents, Sarah, and even extended family members tried to spin the narrative to paint me as the villain, the ungrateful child who had taken advantage of his own family's generosity. I wasn't just battling them in court. I was battling their lies, their manipulation, and the way they tried to rewrite the story of my life. At first, I felt a strange sense of relief, as though I could finally breathe. I had fought back and won. My inheritance was returned to me, along with additional damages for the emotional distress they had caused me. It wasn't just the money, it was the principle. For once, I was validated. I had been treated like a ghost for so long, and now I was standing up as a real person, someone who mattered. But despite the legal victory, my family didn't just disappear. They tried to contact me multiple times, trying to offer hollow apologies and requests to move forward. They claimed that they had made mistakes and that they wanted to make things right, but I wasn't fooled. Apologies mean nothing when they come after you've been forced to face the consequences of your actions. Each time I saw their names pop up on my phone, I couldn't help but feel a wave of disgust. How could they think I just welcomed them back into my life after everything they had put me through? The first time they showed up at my door, I knew it wasn't just a casual visit. My heart sank as I saw them standing on the porch. My mom, dad, Sarah, and her new husband, all grinning like everything was fine, like the past never happened. It was like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. They thought they could just waltz back in, pretend that the years of neglect and manipulation didn't matter. Surprised, my mom said, flashing a fake smile, "We heard you bought a house. We're so proud of you." I stood there, frozen, my hands gripping the doorframe. It was as if my entire body was telling me not to let them in, not to let them back into my life. I wanted to slam the door in their faces, but a part of me still couldn't believe it was happening. Sarah pushed forward, her baby in her arms. She looked around the entryway, taking in the modest space I had created for myself. Nice place. Bro, you've really done well for yourself. I could feel the anger bubbling inside of me. It wasn't just about them showing up like nothing had happened. It was the audacity, the arrogance of thinking they could just ask for everything back. For years, they had ignored me, pushed me aside, and now, after I had fought tooth and nail to get my life together, they thought they could just take it all from me again. My dad stepped forward, clearing his throat like he was about to give some fatherly speech. "We were thinking," he began, "with Sarah's family growing and all, and you having this big house to yourself, maybe it's time to let bygones be bygones. Family should stick together, right?" I couldn't even laugh. Family? These were the same people who had shoved me out into the cold to make room for Sarah's new baby. The same people who had never once considered how I felt. They had told me to figure it out, and now they were asking me to open my door to them as if everything was fine. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my shaking hands. I wasn't going to let them manipulate me anymore. "What are you really asking for?" I asked, my voice cold and steady. My mom's smile faltered, but she pressed on, undeterred. "Well, we thought it would be nice if we all moved in here. One big happy family, like old times." The words hit me like a slap in the face. One big happy family. How could they even say that with a straight face? I had spent years living in their shadows, constantly ignored, constantly made to feel like I didn't matter. And now, they wanted me to give them the very thing I had fought so hard to build. I couldn't contain it anymore. My voice rose, and the anger I had buried deep inside of me finally erupted. "No," I said firmly, "that's not happening." Their smiles dropped instantly. My mom's face twisted in confusion, and my dad puffed up his chest, trying to intimidate me, just like he always did. "But we're family," he insisted. "We should help each other out." Where was that attitude when I was 16 and sleeping in a tent in the backyard? I shot back, my voice shaking with fury. Where was family then? For a moment, there was silence. My parents stood there, stunned, unable to form a response. My dad's face turned bright red, and for the first time, I didn't feel afraid of him. I wasn't that scared kid anymore. I wasn't going to let him bully me into submission. Sarah stepped forward, putting on a fake hurt expression. "Come on, don't be selfish. We need the space. And you owe us that." I could feel my blood boiling. "I don't owe you anything." I snapped. "You kicked me out when I was a kid. left me with nothing, and now you think you can just show up and take over? Get out!" Their faces turned crimson, but they didn't yell. They couldn't. I had finally stood my ground. For years, I had let them dictate my worth, and for the first time, I had shown them that I wouldn't let them walk all over me anymore. My mom's voice softened, like she was trying to guilt me. "We know we've made mistakes," she said, almost pleading. "We just want to make things right. We want to be a family again." I stared at her, feeling a deep emptiness. This wasn't about making things right. This was about them wanting something from me. They didn't care about me. They only cared about what I had, and I wasn't going to give it to them. "Family isn't about blood," I said coldly. "It's about who shows up for you, who supports you, and you've never done that." With that, I slammed the door in their faces. They tried to contact me again. Texts, calls, even emails. They wanted to make amends, but I didn't respond. I blocked their numbers, deleted their messages, and made it clear that they were no longer welcome in my life. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. I had spent so many years waiting for them to love me, for them to acknowledge me as more than just an inconvenience. But the truth was, I didn't need them. I had built my own life. I had learned to stand on my own, and I wasn't about to let them tear it down. Days turned into weeks, and the silence from my family was deafening. I thought they might just give up, but toxic people don't just disappear. I had learned that the hard way. And then, just when I thought I could finally move on and leave it all behind, they found another way to mess with me. Seconds. Explosive hook. You won't believe what happened when my parents, who kicked me out at 16 to give my room to my pregnant twin, showed up at my door years later asking to move in. But it gets so much worse. 8 to 30 seconds. Rapid story tease. For years, I was the forgotten twin. My sister Sarah got all the love, all the gifts, and I got scraps. No one noticed, no one cared. But when I turned 16, they kicked me out to make room for Sarah's baby, leaving me homeless with nothing but a tent in the backyard. But here's the twist. They didn't just leave me on the streets, they kept using me, hiding my inheritance, and even lying to everyone in town about me. Years later, after everything I'd worked for, my family shows up at my house asking for a place to live. After all that betrayal, I had no intention of letting them back in my life. But when I found out what they were really after, that was the last straw. 30 pounds to 45, second, strong CTA, bridge to long form. But that's just the beginning. The revenge I pulled off, genius. I had to break it down for you in my full video. It's unbelievable. You won't see the twist coming. Full story in my latest video, link in bio. What happens next? Will I get justice, or will they tear it all down again? Watch now. Key techniques used. Urgency with phrases like "you won't believe," "unbelievable," "genius," and "the last straw." Intrigue about the mystery of the revenge. Emotional connection by showing relatable family struggles and underestimation. Strong hook with a satisfying buildup, leaving the viewer desperate to see the full revenge. Story 2. My name's Noah. For most of my life, I had felt like a shadow in the bright spotlight of my family. It's a strange feeling, knowing you're expected to fill shoes you never agreed to wear. But I did. I wore those shoes anyway, hoping one day my family would see me for who I was. You see, the Grays weren't just any family. We were the family in the medical world. My father, Dr. Andrew Gray, had built a respected career as one of the top cardiologists in the country. My mother, Isabella, was an equally revered surgeon, and my older brother, Ethan, followed in their footsteps with ease. Medical school, A given, prestigious hospitals expected. When it came to being a part of this legacy, the plan was simple. You follow the path, or you fall behind. But I wasn't interested in being a part of their well-mapped blueprint. While Ethan was dissecting human anatomy textbooks at the dinner table, I was hunched over old computers in the basement, trying to fix broken servers, coding late into the night. I had a love for technology, the way circuits clicked together. The hum of machines working perfectly, it was like a symphony to me. I loved it. But my family didn't see that. Ethan was the heir. He wore a stethoscope before he could walk and recited medical terminology before he could string a sentence together. To my parents, his achievements were expected. But me, I was always just the dreamer, the odd one. Whenever my parents spoke of me, it was as if my interests were some childish phase. I could still hear my father's voice echoing from the dinner table one night. his words cutting through the conversation like a knife. "Noah, you're wasting your potential," he said. "Technology is all well and good, but what the world needs are doctors, not dreamers." I had to swallow hard to keep the anger down. I was good at what I did better than anyone gave me credit for, but no one seemed to care. It didn't stop there. Every family dinner was a competition. Ethan, the golden child, effortlessly impressed everyone with his perfect grades, his effortless charm, and his endless string of hospital internships. Meanwhile, I was the one quietly working on a new tech prototype in my room. I remember how my mother would act like she was proud, but her gaze would always linger on Ethan's accomplishments. "I'm sure you'll get it right one day." "Noah," she'd say, "the year I finally told my family I wouldn't be pursuing medicine was the year I knew things would never be the same." It was Thanksgiving. The night before my 25th birthday, I had been working on a health tech startup, a non-invasive diagnostic tool that I believed could revolutionize the industry. But it wasn't what they wanted. It wasn't medicine. And when I announced my decision, I saw the shock in their eyes. I'll never forget that moment. The silence stretched across the room, thick and uncomfortable. My father's fork clinked against his plate, his eyes narrowing. "You're throwing everything away for some toy," he said, his voice harsh. "This isn't a game, Noah. This is the real world. You need to grow up." I could feel the weight of my mother's disappointed stare from across the table. "Noah, we've supported you your entire life, and this is how you repay us. You're wasting your time chasing fantasies." And then Ethan, of course, added his own barb, just to make sure I knew where I stood. "Maybe it's a good thing you're not going to med school. Noah, you'll never be able to keep up with the pace." They all laughed, a laugh that didn't reach their eyes. I tried to stay calm, but the sting of their words cut deeper than I expected. For a brief moment, I wanted to tell them that I wasn't some foolish child. I wasn't a disappointment. But I didn't. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the polished floor, and I walked out of the room. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dim light of my apartment, coding feverishly, using the frustration as fuel. My mind raced if I could just prove them wrong. If I could just show them that my ideas were worth something, I had to. Over the next few months, I threw myself into my work with a new sense of purpose. I moved into a cheaper apartment, avoided all family gatherings, and stopped reaching out for approval. My startup, Medisense, was born in those long, lonely nights, in the small, cramped space where I didn't have to answer to anyone. The first year was a blur. I used every cent I had saved, working with small clinics to test my diagnostic tool. But despite the struggles, I was seeing results. Medisense was slowly gaining traction. My technology started showing promise, and by the time the second year rolled around, I was seeing some small victories: early investment, recognition from tech journals, and finally a handful of respected clients. I knew the progress was small, but to me, it felt like a victory. This was my world now. It wasn't the world I had been forced into. It wasn't the world of white coats and stethoscopes. This was about changing lives with technology. This was about making a difference on my terms. But then came the call. It was from my mother, of course. "Hi, Noah," she said, her voice dripping with that unmistakable sweetness. "Your father and I are celebrating our 40th wedding anniversary. It would mean a lot to us if you could come. You're still family, after all." It was the same fake enthusiasm she had shown at Thanksgiving. But this time, something in me snapped. I had been avoiding them, refusing to let them back into my life. But now they were asking for me, for their perfect family picture. I didn't hesitate. I agreed to go. Not because I wanted reconciliation, not because I wanted their approval, but because I needed closure. I wanted to stand in front of them as the person they had never seen, someone who had succeeded on his own, without their help. So, I showed up, dressed in a tailored suit that screamed success. I walked into that family celebration, my family's celebration, with my head held high. I expected the usual: a few polite greetings, a dismissive glance, a forced smile. But what I didn't expect was the moment when everything changed. The Thorne Mansion, where I grew up, was as grand as ever: pristine white walls, gleaming marble floors, chandeliers that could blind you if you looked too closely. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and fresh lilies. It was a place built on perfection, on appearances, on the carefully curated image of a family that, from the outside, had it all together. But the more I looked around, the more I realized how hollow it all was. My parents, still working the room with their practiced smiles, barely even acknowledged my presence. My mother, always so polished, greeted me with a casual, "Oh, Noah, you made it." Her eyes darting immediately back to the other guests. She was already scanning for more important faces to impress. My father, too, gave me a quick nod before turning to speak to a group of his colleagues. It was like I was invisible. No hugs, no welcome, just the cold acknowledgement that I had shown up as part of their social obligation. Ethan Ball, of course, was the star of the evening. He was resplendent in his tailored suit, speaking with a surgeon's confidence to a group of admirers. He looked every bit the part of the family's golden child, the one who would carry the family legacy forward. And I was just the oddball, standing in the shadows, sipping on a glass of lukewarm champagne, trying my best to not let the bitterness seep into my expression. It was a stark reminder of the roles we'd been assigned in this family. Ethan was the heir, the one everyone admired. I was just the one who got by, the one who wasn't good enough, the one who was constantly compared, sometimes indirectly, but always there. I stood in the corner, watching the celebration unfold, trying to ignore the sting of their indifference. And just as I was starting to drown in the suffocating atmosphere of the party, something shifted. The door opened with a flourish, and in walked Arthur Peterson, the CEO of Global Midorp, my family's biggest business partner. The man was an icon in the medical world, a titan of the industry. The chatter in the room quieted as all eyes turned to him. My parents straightened up, their faces lighting up with eager smiles. My father's booming voice, usually reserved for belittling me, now sounded almost soft as he introduced Arthur to some of his colleagues. But then, in a moment I could only describe as surreal, Mr. Peterson's gaze landed on me. I didn't expect it. I was just a shadow in the room, after all. But there it was, that flicker of recognition in his eyes, followed by a broad, genuine smile. "Michael Thorne," he said, his voice cutting through the whispers of the room. "It's an honor to finally meet you. I've been trying to get a meeting with you for weeks. Your diagnostic tech is incredible." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. I almost didn't believe it. Was he actually talking to me in front of all these people? A chill ran down my spine as my parents' faces froze. Their smiles faltered as they looked at each other in horror, then back to me. Arthur walked towards me with a purpose, his handshake firm, his presence commanding attention. "The work your company is doing at Medisense is revolutionary. Our team at Global Midorp is already integrating your technology into our hospitals across the country. It's been a game changer." The silence that followed was deafening. My parents, the people who had ridiculed me for following my passion, were now standing on the sidelines, visibly flustered. I could see the panic in their eyes. My father's once confident, booming voice was now reduced to a shaky whisper as he mumbled something about family business while trying to steer Arthur away from me. But it was too late. The damage was done. I felt a strange sense of satisfaction bubbling inside me, but it was mixed with something else: disgust. Disgust at how they had treated me all these years. Disgust at how they had dismissed my ideas, only for those same ideas to be the backbone of their success. I looked directly at my father, his face pale as he realized the truth. "Funny, Dad," I said, my voice calm but laced with a quiet venom. "You told me my ideas were foolish, that I was wasting my life chasing dreams. But it seems those foolish ideas are exactly what's fueling your success now. Medisense is responsible for a huge portion of Thorne Medical's recent growth, isn't it?" My father's jaw clenched, but he didn't say anything. The reality of the situation was too much for him to process. My mother, standing nearby, grasped her pearl necklace so tightly her knuckles turned white. She opened her mouth to say something, but the words never came. She was too exposed now, too vulnerable. Arthur Peterson, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, stepped in with a friendly chuckle, trying to diffuse the tension. But his voice couldn't mask the shock in the room. "It's all right," he said. "No harm done. I'm just so glad we finally made this connection." I turned my gaze back to my father. "I remember, Dad," I said softly. "You told me I wasn't cut out for this world, but now you're benefiting from everything I created." The room was buzzing now, whispers of the truth spreading. I could hear snippets of conversation behind me. Did he really just say that? Is that true? The family's been using his tech all along. My parents' perfect facade was crumbling in front of their eyes. Ethan, ever the performer, had frozen mid-conversation with some of the guests. His face was a mix of disbelief and embarrassment. The smug superiority he had once carried now looked ridiculous, exposed for what it was, a facade built on my sacrifice. The next few moments felt like they passed in slow motion. I could see the guests exchanging uneasy glances. The party, once so lively, now felt suffocating. The smiles were gone, replaced by uncertainty and discomfort. It was no longer about their reputation. It was about the truth, and that truth was out in the open. As the room slowly started to empty out, with most guests making awkward excuses to leave, I realized something. They were scared. Not of me, but of the fact that they had been caught. They had been pretending all this time, but now there was no hiding. The truth was out, and there was no way to take it back. I felt a deep sense of satisfaction, but it wasn't the kind of triumph I had expected. It wasn't the feeling of victory that I had dreamed of. It was a quiet, almost sorrowful realization. I wasn't the one who had changed. They were the ones exposed, and now they had to face the consequences. My father's attempt to regain control came too late. "Michael," he called, his voice faltering. "You've misunderstood. This is family business. You don't air these things publicly. We can fix this. Just let's work it out." I shook my head slowly, the anger and frustration that had once burned inside me now replaced by a cold, unshakable clarity. "No, Dad, this isn't a misunderstanding. This is the truth. And I'm done being your pawn in your little game." The days following the party felt surreal. It was as if a dam had broken, and everything, my family, my past, my entire identity had been swept away in a flood of cold, harsh reality. The whispers still echoed in my mind, a constant reminder of how deeply things had shifted. But unlike the old me, the one who would have cowered under the weight of their disapproval, I no longer felt the familiar urge to hide. No, this time, I was standing firm, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to fit into their world. I was creating my own. I had always been their lesser, the one whose achievements were never enough. My mother's voice, dripping with thinly veiled contempt, played over and over in my head. "You should be more like Ethan. Michael, why can't you just be practical?" Every word, every glance had chipped away at me, but in the months since that disastrous Thanksgiving dinner, I had started to change. MediSense had grown. It was no longer just a pipe dream or a side project. It was a thriving company, one that I was proud of. I didn't need their approval. In fact, I had come to realize that I didn't need anything from them anymore. I stayed in my tiny apartment in the city, now comfortably settled in my new life. It wasn't much small rooms, worn-out furniture, but it was mine. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like an outsider. I had built something. I had built myself. The realization settled in one quiet morning as I sat at my cluttered desk. The soft hum of my computer the only sound in the room. My life was finally my own, and it felt damn good. But despite all that, I couldn't escape the nagging feeling that they were still out there, still watching, still hoping to tear down what I had worked so hard to build. My parents, especially, couldn't let go of the fact that their carefully constructed world had unraveled so quickly. I knew it wasn't over, not by a long shot. It didn't take long for the fallout to reach me. Articles about the party, about the family drama, began to pop up in every gossip column. My parents' carefully maintained image of the perfect family was suddenly a joke, the subject of scorn and ridicule. My father, once a respected figure in the medical field, now found himself at the center of a storm. The whispers, the sideways glances, the subtle judgments, all of it came crashing down on them. And it was all because of one thing: me. The once glossy image of the Thorne family was now marred by a deep, embarrassing crack. My mother, in her desperate attempts to salvage whatever shred of dignity she had left, began calling me. But it wasn't for reconciliation. It wasn't to apologize. No, it was to try and regain control. "Michael, please," her voice pleaded over the phone. "This isn't how things should be. We're a family. Don't do this. You're making us look terrible." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The message was clear. They were angry not at the way they had treated me, Not at the way they had sabotaged my career and dismissed my success, but because their carefully manicured reputation was now in shambles. And somehow, I was the villain. One evening, a message from Sarah arrived. She was the last person I expected to reach out to me, especially after everything that had happened. Her note was short, but the words were heavy. Michael, I didn't know what I was a part of. I'm sorry. I hope you're doing okay. It stung more than I'd expected. The person I had looked up to as a sister, the one I had spent my life comparing myself to, had finally seen the truth, but the apology felt too little, too late. She had been complicit in their world, a part of their game, and now she was trying to distance herself from the fallout. I thought about replying, but I didn't. The words I had said that night in the ballroom were still too fresh in my mind. You chose to believe what was convenient. Sarah, that's on you. The next few weeks were a blur of media attention, legal meetings, sabayinti, and personal reflection. The more I distanced myself from my family, the clearer the picture became. The layers of my life had been built on expectations that I didn't choose, on an image that wasn't mine. And now I was free of it. I didn't need their validation. I had created my own identity, my own success. And then came the phone call. It was Elias Vance, the lawyer who had, years ago, misplaced my patent documents. I hadn't thought of him in months, but when his name flashed on the screen, a cold knot formed in my stomach. I knew what this was. The Thorne family had always been great at playing dirty, and I was about to get the proof. Michael, Elias said, his voice as smooth as ever. I've been instructed to inform you that your parents are requesting a meeting to discuss, well, the family situation. He cleared his throat. I think you know what I mean. I chuckled darkly. What's the real reason? Elias? Are they trying to buy me off again? Maybe they finally realized how valuable I am. Elias hesitated before answering, and that was all I needed to know. They were desperate. I just want to make sure you're protected. Michael, they've been making moves. They won't stop trying to control things, even now. I could feel the tension radiating from his words, and I knew that this wasn't just about family. It was about power. And they were going to use everything they had to take it back. But I wasn't going to let them. Not anymore. As I sat in my office later that day, my fingers hovered over the keyboard, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. I had already built my own empire. Medisense was mine, and I wasn't about to let them tear it down. The legal battle I had been avoiding was now inevitable. I needed to put everything in place to protect my company and my future. They had already tried to destroy me once. This time, I would be the one calling the shots. I called Mark, my closest ally and co-founder, who had been with me through every late-night coding session and every frustrating moment. Mark, we need to move fast. I said, I'm not playing their game anymore. Let's lock down everything. Every patent, every piece of intellectual property, everything. They're coming for us. Mark's response was immediate, the support in his voice unwavering. We've got your back. Michael. Always. And so, the groundwork for what was to come was set. I would fight for what was mine, and this time, it wouldn't be for their approval. It would be for my own peace, my own future. The Thorne family had made their choices, and now I was making mine, and I wasn't going to let anyone, especially not them, stand in my way. Story 3. You know what's funny? How clearly you can see the cracks in a foundation once the whole house has come crashing down. Looking back, the signs were always there. Subtle, quiet fissures in the family facade that I mistook for the typical wear and tear. I'm Alex. Or, at least, I was Alex, the Alex who believed in family above all else. The one who thought that loyalty and sacrifice would always be enough. That the bonds you have with the people who raised you could never break, no matter what. The Alex who spent 15 years as a software developer, diligently squirreling away every penny, dreaming of a future that felt secure enough for everyone. I was the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who always played by the rules. And my savings, they weren't just numbers in an account. They were the culmination of late nights coding, skipped vacations, and disciplined living. That $80,000, it wasn't just my future. It was a promise I made to myself. I'll never have to rely on anyone else. I'll be the one to provide. It never occurred to me that the very people I was helping could one day be the ones to destroy that security. Our family, at least on the surface, was the picture of the typical American dream. My father, John, was the patriarch. Big voice, big presence. He'd clap me on the back when I did something right, but the approval always felt so fleeting, so dependent on his mood. And when he disapproved, oh, you could feel it in the air, that icy chill that made everything seem hollow. My mother, Mary, was the loyal second in command, the one who could soothe with a meal or a soft word, but her softness had a hard edge. She was a woman of subtle expectations. And then there was Leo, my younger brother, the golden child. Everything seemed to fall into his lap. The charm, the success. He could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. I was always the afterthought, the hard worker, the dutiful one. But Leo, he was the one with the big ideas, the one who could talk his way out of anything, even when he hadn't earned it. I remember one Sunday dinner, the smell of Mom's pot roast wafting through the air. It used to be comforting, but that night it was suffocating. I had just landed a significant promotion at work. Finally, after years of grinding, my dedication had paid off, but instead of a heartfelt acknowledgement, I got a quick pat on the back from my dad and a nod of approval. The rest of the conversation was about Leo and his latest idea, something about creating a viral YouTube channel. Still working away at that keyboard, huh, Alex? Leo smirked, his voice dripping with condescension. I swallowed the bitter lump in my throat, forcing a smile. Yeah, Leo, living the dream. That was Leo's way. Subtle jabs disguised as humor, and somehow, I was always the punchline. It wasn't long before the pitch came. I should have known. I should have seen the trap, but, like a fool, I let myself be swayed by the promises of family. Alex, Dad said one evening, his voice suddenly serious. We've been thinking about expanding the deli. The business has a lot of potential. We could open a second location downtown. Think about it, a real family legacy. Mom chimed in, her eyes sparkling with a mix of hope and expectation. This could set us up for the future. Your future too. Alex, we want you to be a part of this. I didn't hesitate, or I thought I didn't. They were family. I trusted them. And the thought of them struggling, of my dad working long hours at the deli with little reward, it pulled at my heartstrings. This is what family does. I thought, you help them, you invest in them. They made it sound so easy, so ideal. My savings would be the key to their dream. They promised. The investment would secure not just their future but mine too, a percentage of the profits, a seat at the table. And so, I handed over my life savings, $80,000. They didn't ask for a formal agreement, not that I cared. It wasn't about business, it was about trust. We were family, after all, but when I asked about the paperwork, about shares, returns, my dad's response was swift. Alex, we're family, trust us, this is going to work. Leo had laughed, and my mother patted my hand, her soft, reassuring voice calming my last doubts. Oh, you trust us, don't you? Alex, she'd said, we're doing this for all of us. And for a moment, it felt right. It felt like a step towards building something together. But then, the months went by, and nothing changed. Every time I asked about the business, about how things were going, Dad would wave me off. It's all going fine, son. Don't worry about the details, he'd say, or, things take time. Alex, these things aren't instant. Meanwhile, Leo started driving a nicer car, wearing new clothes. The business was flourishing, they said, but Leo's lifestyle was what was flourishing. My anxiety grew, but I kept quiet. It was family, after all. The tipping point came on a quiet Tuesday night. Mom had baked an apple pie, the scent filling the house with an almost nostalgic warmth. I couldn't eat. I was too nervous. The nagging feeling in my stomach had turned into full-blown dread. So I asked, Hey, Dad, it's been almost a year. Can we talk about the financials? I haven't seen anything about the investment, and I just want to know how things are going. The silence that followed was thick. The sound of my father's fork scraping against his plate was unnervingly loud. Financials. Dad's voice was hard, suddenly cold. This is family money now, Alex. It's not about spreadsheets. It's about trust. I pressed on, trying to remain calm. I know it's family, but it's my money. Dad, I have a right to know how it's being used. His face reddened with anger, the vein in his neck bulging. How dare you question me like this after everything we've done for you? Mom's face, always so gentle, suddenly hardened. Alex, how can you be so ungrateful? You're breaking your father's heart. I tried to explain, I tried to be reasonable, but their voices drowned me out. The manipulation, the guilt, it was too much. And then I saw it, the cold truth that had been hidden beneath layers of affection and promises. It wasn't about family, it wasn't about trust, it was about control and money. The confrontation ended with me retreating to my room, but the storm inside me was only just beginning. The next morning, I opened my bank account, my heart pounding in my chest. $0. Gone. Every last cent. I took a deep breath and called the bank. The withdrawals, they told me, had been made steadily over the past year, the largest just a few months ago. And where had the money gone? To an account I didn't recognize. I didn't wait. I drove straight to their house. My father and mother were sitting in the kitchen, sipping coffee, like nothing had changed. The money, I said, voice trembling. Where is it? Dad didn't even look up from his newspaper. What money? The $80,000? It's gone. Dad, where did it go? Finally, he glanced at me, his eyes cold and full of contempt. You've always been the most useless one in this house. Alex, you never understood what it means to sacrifice for the family. My heart broke. My mother didn't say a word. She just shook her head slowly, a slow, calculating pity in her eyes. And that's when I realized they had lied. They had stolen from me, and they thought they could get away with it. I felt like the ground beneath me was vanishing. My father's words hung in the air, sharp and venomous, like the last breath of a dying dream. Useless. It wasn't the first time he'd said it, but this time it cut deeper than ever. The words didn't just strike at my pride, they sank into my very soul. How could he say that? After everything I had done, everything I had given, how could my own father call me useless? The anger surged up in me, but I didn't let it show. Instead, I took a breath, trying to keep my voice steady. But inside, it was chaos. I had trusted them. They were my family, my own flesh and blood. And this was how they repaid me. Where is my money? Dad, I asked again, my voice quieter but insistent. Dad looked at me, his eyes narrowed, his face full of contempt. It's invested in the family business, in your brother's future. Leo, the golden boy. Of course, it was in Leo's future. Everything always revolved around Leo. His shiny new clothes, his car, his lavish lifestyle, it was all somehow justified by the family business. Meanwhile, I worked hard, saved every penny, and did everything I could to keep us afloat. And they stole it, all of it. My future, I muttered, my words thick with disbelief. This isn't just family money, Dad. This was my savings, my life's work. I had plans, dreams, and now it's all gone. For what? Stop whining, he shot back, his voice rising again. You've had everything handed to you. What's one less thing? I stared at him, struggling to keep the anger from consuming me. But it was hard. Every time I looked at them, I saw how far gone they were, how far they'd gone to protect their golden child, Leo, and I had been left in the dust, alone. Leo, as always, sat there doing nothing. He was the king of passive-aggressive manipulation. He took advantage of the family dynamic, playing the part of the innocent, charming little brother while using the situation to his benefit. And now, as I stood there, practically shaking with the weight of their betrayal, he had the nerve to look at me with that smug, superior smile. Come on. Alex, don't be such a drama queen, Leo said, looking up from his phone. Dad's been under a lot of stress. You know, why don't you just let him handle things? I wanted to lash out, to scream at him and finally make him understand the pain they'd put me through. But instead, I turned on my heel and walked out of that kitchen, unable to stomach their indifference anymore. Later that day, after I had calmed down a little, I sat in my car for what felt like hours, just thinking about everything. The realization hit me like a freight train. The money wasn't just gone. It had been taken, stolen, even. I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I logged into my online banking account again, hoping against hope that I had somehow misread the balance earlier. But no, it was still zero. The pit in my stomach deepened. And then, I did something I should have done long ago. I called the bank I trusted to keep my money safe. I took a long breath as I dialed the number, trying to keep my voice from shaking. Can you tell me the transaction history on my account, the last year's worth? The woman on the other end of the line was polite, but the moment she spoke, my blood ran cold. Large withdrawals. Mr. Miller, consistent over the past 10 months, the largest one? Just under half your savings was transferred to an account you don't recognize. I could feel the walls closing in around me. My father's betrayal wasn't just a simple mistake, a miscommunication. This was deliberate. This was planned. I hung up the phone, my hands trembling, and drove to their house. I couldn't wait any longer. I had to confront them again. Now, they were in the kitchen again. They always were. It was as if nothing had changed, as if everything that had happened earlier that day didn't matter. I stepped inside, holding the bank statement in my hands, the papers crumpled in my tight grip. I didn't say a word. I just placed the papers down in front of them. My father's eyes flicked over the papers and then back to me, his expression unreadable. "Explain it," I said, my voice hoarse. "I've told you. Alex, it's gone into the business. It's for the family's future," he said, his tone now more defensive, his earlier confidence replaced with a nervous edge. I pointed to the transaction on the paper. "This doesn't make any sense. Why would you transfer my savings to an account I don't recognize?" "Enough of this," Dad snapped. "You're going to tear this family apart over some money. You really think you deserve to be handed everything just because you're the responsible one? You think Leo has it easy? No. He's the one with ambition, the one who's got the vision for the future." I stared at him in disbelief. This wasn't about ambition. This wasn't about hard work. This was about greed. Leo didn't deserve it. He never had. That's when I saw it, the look in my mother's eyes, the flicker of something. Guilt, fear. I couldn't quite place it, but I knew one thing my mother knew. She knew exactly what had happened. I turned to her, and her face immediately twisted into something sad and fake. "Alex, don't you understand? It's for Leo. He needs this." I snapped. "No, it's my money, my future. And you spent it all like it didn't matter." At that moment, I realized the truth. It wasn't about family. It never had been. I wasn't their family. I was just their useful fool, the one who could be relied on when they needed something, and cast aside when they didn't. My mother's voice broke, but it wasn't sorrow that filled her tone. It was anger. Anger that I had the audacity to question them. "Alex, you have no idea what we've sacrificed. How could you be so selfish?" "Selfish," I repeated, incredulous. "Selfish. You took everything from me. You took my savings, my trust, and for what?" That night, after hours of pacing and stewing over everything, I couldn't sit still anymore. I had to find answers. I had to get justice. So, I did what I had to do. I called my lawyer, Greg, who had been a quiet but steady presence in my life, offering me the kind of clarity my family never could. "I want to sue them," I said, my voice steady, calm. "They've stolen from me, and I'm not going to let them get away with it." Greg didn't hesitate. "We'll make sure they can't hide from this. You deserve answers." Alex, the days that followed were a blur of anger, frustration, and overwhelming disbelief. For the first time in my life, I was questioning everything I had ever known about family, trust, and loyalty. The weight of what I was about to do felt suffocating, but it also felt like the only thing left I could do for myself. I sat in my small apartment, staring at the stack of papers in front of me. Bank statements, the transfer details, emails from my father and mother discussing the family business, and the chilling evidence that they had been planning this all along. It was like they had been setting up a game, and I had been the unsuspecting pawn. The lawsuit wasn't going to be easy. Greg had made that clear from the start. Family cases were always messy. There was the emotional baggage, the sense of betrayal, and most of all, the personal history that complicated everything. But Greg wasn't just a lawyer. He was a bulldog when he needed to be. And this was personal. He told me to be prepared for the fallout. There was no way to predict how my parents would react, but one thing was certain: they were going to fight tooth and nail to avoid taking responsibility. I had made the decision. No turning back. The first family meeting was nothing short of a spectacle. We had arranged it with the intention of confronting them face to face, to demand the money back, to force them to take responsibility. But when I walked into their living room, with Sarah by my side for moral support, I was met with an icy atmosphere. The same house I grew up in, the same house that had once felt like a sanctuary, now felt like a courtroom. My father, leaning back in his armchair, his gaze fixed on me with a kind of cold calculation that made my stomach turn. And my mother sitting beside him, her expression a careful mask of false concern, both of them in complete denial of what they had done. Leo wasn't there. Of course, he wasn't. He was always the invisible hand behind the scenes, the one pulling the strings while pretending to be an innocent bystander. Alex, my father started, his voice smooth, almost rehearsed. I know you're upset, but you need to understand this was necessary for the business. You've always been the practical one, the one who thinks of things logically. We did think of you. You know, I nearly choked on my own disbelief. Think of me. Really? Because from where I'm standing, you took everything I worked for without any accountability. You used my savings as if it was yours to take. There was no business plan, no formal agreement, and certainly no transparency. You promised me a stake in the business, and what did I get in return? Nothing. You didn't even bother to tell me where the money was going. Alex, you know this is family business. My mother interjected, her voice dripped with that familiar, manipulative sweetness. We're doing this for the future. For you, too. For all of us. How can you be so ungrateful? Her words stung, but it was nothing compared to the weight of what I had uncovered. My entire life had been spent trying to gain their approval, trying to make them see me for more than just the good son. Yet here they were, turning on me in a way I could never have imagined. I kept my composure. Ungrateful. You took my money and pretended it was for the family's benefit, but I'm starting to see the truth. You didn't even care to make this work. It was all for Leo, wasn't it? My father's face darkened. Enough with the accusations. Alex, you've crossed a line. If you're not willing to let this go, then you've made your choice. I glanced at Sarah. She squeezed my hand, silently offering her support, but I could feel the heat of the moment consuming me. This wasn't just about the money anymore. This was about control, manipulation, and the illusion of family they had built for themselves. The next few days were an emotional roller coaster. Sarah helped me gather more evidence, and Greg worked tirelessly to prepare for the legal battle. It was exhausting physically, mentally, emotionally. The anxiety gnawed at me, but there was something else beneath the surface now. A quiet fire. The pieces of my life that I thought had been scattered were starting to fall into place. This wasn't just about the $80,000. This was about taking back my life, my future, and reclaiming the respect that had been so carelessly denied to me. One night, a week after that disastrous meeting, I sat in my apartment flicking through the evidence Sarah had uncovered, emails, old bank records, and then, there it was, the email that confirmed what I had suspected all along, a message from my father to a company I'd never heard of, Apex Specialized Kitchens. They had received a substantial payment for new kitchen equipment. The amount was just under $40,000. It hit me like a ton of bricks. I had been lied to, not just about the money, but about the entire business. My father had been using my savings to fund his own interests, buying things he didn't need, spending on whatever he felt like, all while pretending to be investing in a family legacy. That was the moment I knew for sure. It wasn't just financial mismanagement, it was fraud. It was deception. My parents had used me again. I called Greg the next morning, my voice steady, even though I could feel the weight of it all crashing down on me. It's time. I said, I want to take legal action. I want to expose everything. Greg was ready. He was calm, confident, and ready to fight back. He filed the necessary paperwork and set the wheels in motion. I'd done everything I could, but now it was in his hands. But, of course, my parents didn't take this lying down. They fought back with everything they had. Their lawyer sent me a cease and desist letter, demanding I drop the case or face legal repercussions. I almost laughed. It wasn't the first time they'd tried to control me with threats, but this time, it wasn't going to work. They couldn't intimidate me anymore. The first court hearing was brutal. Sitting across from my parents in that cold, sterile room, it felt like I was facing strangers, their faces once familiar. Once the faces of the people who raised me looked different now. Smaller, weaker. It wasn't about money anymore. It wasn't about a house. This was about who they were and who I was no longer willing to be. The battle raged on, but I was finally starting to feel something else: peace. Even as the legal process dragged on, I could see the truth starting to come out. I wasn't the villain here. I wasn't the ungrateful son. I was the one fighting for my rights.